Across generations, Cameroon has produced brilliant sports journalists. These icons have not only shaped the journalism landscape in the country, but have also paved the way for younger colleagues to shine the spotlight on the noble profession, which is journalism. In today's edition of the program, we are going in depth into the life and career of a phenomenal football commentator and sports journalist whose influence resonates in Cameroon and beyond. Stay with us. Welcome back. As we told you, our guest is a renowned sports journalist and prolific football commentator who has graced television screens in Cameroon for over 30 years. As we told you, our guest is a renowned sports journalist and prolific football commentator who has graced television screens in Cameroon for 30 years. He fell in love with mathematics and was part of the Lone University in Cameroon at the time, but he will later switch to journalism, a move, of course, that has seen him cover 6 FIFA World Cups, 12 editions of the African Cup of Nations, 25 editions of the Mount Cameroon Race, 20 editions of the University Games, and hosting the flagship English program Sports Vision on the Cameroon Radio Television for 27 years. Now he is an executive member of the International Federation of Football History and Statistics. He is also an author, and some of his books include African Football Legends, Zakarinko, The Ultimate Commentary, and the much and highly anticipated book, Echek's Diary, to be released in the days ahead. Join me to welcome the one and only, with a unique voice, Ignatius Fon Echekiye. Ignatius Fon Echekiye, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you so very much. It's been a pleasure to be here, but it sounds a little unusual to call me Ignatius. So I get it. When you say Ignatius,
Fon Echekiye.
Fon Echekiye is what the public has always known about.
Yeah.
The name called to me by.
Yeah. Your career is a very rich one. Like I mentioned, you covered 6 World Cups, 12 African Cup of Nations, 25 editions of the Mount Cameroon Race, 20 editions of the University Games, and you hosted Sports Vision for 27 years. How are you doing at this moment? What does it feel not to be so active again?
Well, somehow it's interesting because it's a different aspect of life. And you know, when you are born into this world, you are not condemned to live just along one lane of livelihood. There are vast opportunities out there. And so after so many years in one particular field, like sports reporting, so I come out of that and I'm being interviewed instead of being the interviewer.
So being the interviewer.
It's all of that accounts for the spice of life, and it's interesting. As you said, I'm on retirement, that's true, and I'm retired from where I used to work at the Cameroon Radio Television. But not retired from the International Federation of Football History and Statistics, and not even retired from answering yes to appointments on interviews and other things that have to do with sports.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, at what time did it dawn on you to say, okay, it's time for me to leave where I was and embrace retirement from there?
It wasn't a matter of it dawning on me as such. It's always been that when you begin a career, especially when in public service, there's a time lap. At the end of which you are supposed to move on to something else. So that was it. But in my case, it was a little unusual because I came from the Ministry of Information and Culture at the time, and it was like mandatory that when you left school, you went to the ministry and spent some time there. And if the state-owned corporations, CRTV, that is Cameroon Radio Television, or Cameroon Tribune Radio Services, you were taken in to work there and serve there. And of course, following the rule that says that you are a civil servant and you can only work for as much as this length of time. But somehow a few years to the end of my career at CRTV, there was a prime ministerial arrêté that said that you had to harmonize how much time those who came in from the ministry as civil servants were going to live in that house alongside those who had been recruited directly
by the house.
So, and one thing that stood out very clearly there was that you went on retirement at the age of 60. But somehow there's a clause there that says that if you get to 55, which is when you're supposed to go on retirement from the public service, and the house doesn't really need you, then you go at 55. If they do need you, you go at 60. And then beyond that, they still have all these extensions to the contract and stuff like that. For one or two reasons, best known to those who manage the house, they thought that at 55 I had to go, so that's why I left. But I didn't think at the time I was going to go, because at that time, there was this nascent television channel coming up called Sports and Entertainment. And the facts speak for themselves. That was most qualified to manage the station at the time. So I thought that I would have at least 5 more years for going on, but someone said, no, time is up for you to go, and you have to go.
All right, Fon Echekiye, let's go back to the beginning. You are mathematics inclined. That shows even in the commentaries that you have delivered over the years. Tell us about this mysterious switch from mathematics to journalism.
Well, in Bishop Rogan College, where I attended secondary school studies, I completed from that college with 11 O-levels. By the way, 3 of us, myself, Chrysanthus Foncha, and Peter YABADOO, were the first 3 Cameroonian students to score 11 O-level subjects at O-level. And why so? Because at the time, they introduced further mathematics. It wasn't very clear in the minds of the administration whether maths and further maths in the subject council were going to be counted as one subject or 2 different subjects. So we registered maths and further maths and 9 other subjects that gave 11. I remember that shortly after that, the Minister of Education would call the school and say, next time we'll sanction you. We never go beyond 10 subjects. That was in those days. And nowadays it's happening. So from the Bishop Rogan College, I went over to CAS Bambili, where I read chemistry, maths, further maths, and physics. So at the end of my 2-year stay in Bambili, I had 4 A-level passes in the sciences. But I was from a poor family. Nobody could sponsor me abroad. I didn't qualify by points count to benefit from the government subvention as in terms of scholarships. So I had to go to the University of Yaoundé, the only one that was at the time. And so I went and enrolled in what they call at the time analysis, what they call today analysis. That's simply still talking about the math department of the university. Now, this is a blue-blooded Anglophone coming from Bamenda who has spent all of his life studying in English. And you take him to the sciences and you want to teach him in French. In
French, in Yaoundé, for that matter.
So it became very complicated for me. So as the months wore by, I started nosing around for competitive entrance examinations. So what happened was I went in for the competitive entrance examination into the School of Public Works, that for the Higher Engineering College, Polytechnic, and then the School of Journalism. Why School of Journalism, where I was a science student? Because I'd always been an all-round student, and I had a very strong willpower, a strong point, a strong base for literature and English language. So that's why I could go into this for the School of Journalism. But what will happen at the end of the day is that the first results that will be published will be the results of the School of Journalism. So I immediately enrolled in ASMAC and never bothered thereafter to know whatever happened about my performances in the School for Public Works or in the National Polytechnic. Yeah, so that is how I went therefore went on to ASMAC and then went ahead and became a journalist. And of course, the fact that I had read the sciences in the high school had to influence my language.
Of course.
English, it was no longer a matter of handling things that have to do with literature or stuff like that. So it formed the basis for my reporting that you are saying that was special. Well, I guess they were special, but that became my new vehicle of communication.
Yeah, and then you left STIC. You decided to focus on sports journalism. Why the choice?
Why the choice? 2 reasons. The first one was when we left STIC at the time, the political situation in Cameroon was getting a little teasing. John Fundi was moving and shaking the country. So it would appear at the time that the incumbents would not take as friends anybody who wanted to go by the doctrine of the SDF. And so many people who were choosing their careers were like shifting away for anything that had to do with politics. And I said, but well, sports is something where when a goal is scored, it's been scored. There's no such thing as saying that, no, you see, it was a blue goal, it's a black goal and stuff like that. So there you did it without any trouble. But even before then, there was something that had happened to me way back in 1984 when I was a student in the Cameroon College of Art, Science and Technology, Casablanca. And that was a pre-match report that Zakarenko sent from Spain. I listened to the report, and I got so used to it, I began reciting it, and so all of that stayed with me, and then brought me not only to journalism, but into sports reporting.
And you just mentioned the Zakarenko. How inspirational was he to you?
You see, this it was a Tuesday in the afternoon when I came out of classes. So I left my student hostel in Bambali called the Reunification Hall. That was for male students who were in the sciences. There was also the Independence Hall. That was for male students who were in the arts. And then there was Unity Hall at the time, which is for girls. So when I left my room that afternoon, I just strolled to an environment they called Corners in Bambali. And a classmate of mine called Francis Yakam invited me to his room. I joined him there. I was going there with the intention of being treated to a bowl of soaked gari. The other said, but have you listened to a report that has been sent from Spain by Zakarenko? I said, no. So it's totally in there in the audio tape of Zakarenko's pre-match report. When I listened to it, that was a preview of the match Cameroon versus Poland.
The 1982
World Cup. So when I listened to that, it was like, if you say that, like some Christians say,
they'll say the anointing hit you.
Okay, you got it. So it was like, it got hold of me, and then it didn't stop. So therefore, while in the University of Yaoundé, when we were nosing around and looking for which competitive entrance examination to go into, asthma came up because already there had been something in me that was born of the Zakarenko germ. So that was how I chose, I went in for sports journalism.
You wrote a book about Zakarenko, The Ultimate Commentary, and I'm tempted to ask you, give us some of those lines, those legendary lines of Zakarenko.
Well, I want to save you the headache and the viewership the headache of having to listen to some of those things by maybe reciting what he said. That report was what. So that afternoon in 1982, he reported on Spain and said, "Good afternoon. We are 3 hours away from what has been described as a decisive and important encounter. Decisive because a win for either team today will give them a right to leadership in the Four Nations Group 1 following yesterday's 1-1 tie between Italy and Peru. Decisive also because for Cameroon to make the goals this afternoon, the players must be in superlative form, offer no scoring opportunities to the Poles, who have a remarkable flair to capitalize on defense error, and of course adopt and sustain a very aggressive attacking power and spirit for full 90 minutes. Poland, 4 times World Cup finalists, will want to beat Cameroon in a second all-black World Cup opponents, as they did against Haiti in West Germany 8 years ago. But the question is, where do we draw the line between Cameroon and Haiti and between the years 1974 and 1982? Before this afternoon's talk of war between Cameroon and Poland, this is how Frenchman Jean Vincent has put up our national football team. Goalkeeper and captain Thomas Nkono. Defenders from left to right, Kaham Michel, Onana Elundu Eli, Njia René Mbom Ephraim. Halfback Kunde Emmanuel, Abega Theophile, Bida Arantes and Aoudou Ibrahim. Center forward Roger Milan Gea Jacques. Before the 4:15 p.m. clash, and before they answer the question of whether or not Cameroon will make Omar, the British television sports journalist Jerry Harrison says the match between Cameroon and Poland will be tough and tight. Zakarenko in Spain for Radio Cameroon. So that report alone, when I listened to it and memorized it, that is what actually whisked me off the part of the sciences into journalism.
All right, and then you went on internship and you met Jomo Kevin.
Yeah,
and another legend in the domain.
Yeah, before meeting Jomo Kevin, you know, it was mandatory too at the stick that we went on internship. In the first year, we went for the print, where I met people like Emmanuel Tato. I worked on like Chauvin's Law, Emmanuel Tato, Dingambi, I worked under Emmanuel Charlton. And we went into the second year. We went now on internship again at the end of the year, and we still went on the same for the same assignment. So when we get towards the third year, we had to go for our various fields of specialization. That is how I went radio, because I received radio broadcasting training at ASMAC.
ASMAC.
So when I got to the radio house, that was the fall of 1989. The chief sports commentator at the time had just left. Zakarinko had left, had been sent to Boya. And the man who was in charge of the service then was Bo Herbert. But Bo Herbert had one leg at the National Broadcasting House at Longkak, and the other leg at the reporting center, the sports center at Balatu. So more often than not, Jomo Kevin was called up to do things for the sports page. So he actually came in as someone to give a helping hand than having to have been somebody who was in that service. So like, when he came in at it, and I came in at the time, I met him. We didn't spend a very long time together, but for the few moments I had with him there, he was something like a good shepherd, shepherding a sheep that had come in to join the fold.
All right, now, the first report of every journalist is always memorable. Tell us about your first story.
Wow. I can't quite remember the wordings, but I know under what circumstances.
Yeah.
Bo Herbert, as the man in charge of the English desk and the overall boss of the service, worked hand in hand with Jean-Marie Watangsi, who was of the French desk. Now that year, Bo Herbert, as creative and as inventive he had always been, came up with the idea that the sports service of Radio Cameroon could be the one to determine the various awards in the world of football that year. So it was like they came up with questionnaires, which they distributed all over. And reporters of the various radio stations in the country had to give their assessment of who was the best goalkeeper, who was the best club president, which was the best match, and so on and so forth. So that was the fall of that season. So all those results have been tallied. I don't do what they call it despoiling, tallying all the results together. And so that afternoon of that Sunday had to be the announcement of those results. I had been on the decks for internship for quite a while, where Bo Herbert, who was a lover of excellence, did not have a lot of confidence in me. So he hardly gave me the opportunity to come close to the microphone. But that day, I and Wayne Pongam sat in the newsroom and said it made a lot of sense for a preview of that event of that day to be done as a countdown or a build-up to the event. Bo Herbert had been hurled back by rain at home. So at 3 p.m. on that day, he cued me. Wayne Pongam, the news presenter, cued me on, and then I went ahead and read out the report, which I read. So that was my first report as on Radio Cameroon.
On Radio Cameroon.
Yeah.
And then your first official assignment out of the country, the 1992 AFCON. How did you get into the team, and how was the experience? Okay,
now we begin from how I got on the CRTV, which is something viewers need to know about.
Yeah.
We had come out of ASMAC. Sorry, I keep on saying ST because that's what's popular called there, but out of ASMAC. So we were in the Ministry for Information and Culture, and as it had always happened, a number of us were called up and asked to confront a jury at YABADOO. So we met with the jury, and when it was my turn, the jury was in there made up of Peter Isoka, Eric Chinger, so 2 other guys whose names I've forgotten, and you had to face them, answer questions. But before then, and Nimon Monjo, who had been listening to me and during my internship and my reports, had said, this guy will make a great sports journalist. So started campaigning with Eric Chinger, who was the editor-in-chief, to have me come on board. So when the time came for us to meet the jury, it was already known at YABADOO that there was this guy coming in from the Ministry of Information and Culture with a very strong passion of sports reporting. So when I walked into the hall to meet the jury, the first person who stood up and met me was Eric Chinger. I said, welcome, young man. How are you? I said, I'm fine, sir. we know you have a soft spot for sports. Now, let me ask you a question that doesn't have anything to do with sports.
Sports.
They asked me, how many members make the Cameroon House of Assembly? I didn't know the answer because everything in my mind was sports.
Sports.
So I said 171. Just like that. So are you sure? I said, yeah. Peter was laughing and came up and then gave me the script to present. I read out the script and he said, wow, that's good. They asked me to. They asked a very funny question. At that time, something had happened in the country. The so-called win of democracy, win of change.
Yeah, win of change.
And stuff like that. So the guys who presented Cameroon report were thought to have been very subversive. So after a very, I don't know what to say, popular or an infamous edition of the program, a number of them were taken to custody and so on and so forth. And finally, the group was disbanded. So George Tani, who had been the main presenter of the program, left with his team of reporters, and somebody came in called Luke Ananga. Of course, naturally, it didn't matter how professionally good he was. The fact that he was coming following what had gone before him meant that he had to literally dance the rhythm of the powers that be. So the question I was asked was, Cameroon calling as presented by Luke Ananga and Cameroon calling as presented by George Tani, which of the two do you prefer? I paused for a while. I said, I would like working with the people who work with George Tani. So all of the viewers look at themselves like this and they said, okay, you can go. So when the results came out, the radio decks had reporters. Television had only one reporter called Francis Niba. Ben Baker Jovis had traveled to the States. So it was like the English desk was begging for reporters. So they said, okay, you've come in from the School of Journalism. We need a reporter. Somebody has a passion for it. We don't care whether you did radio, you received radio training there or television.
Or television.
Or taking it on television. So that's how I got into television. But the passion was still in me. So I kept on burning with the passion. I was doing my job so well. In fact, I would say so well. Go and make a flashback. It doesn't mean that I'm the one that I wouldn't give the credit where it's due. I can make a flashback and remember that I was doing the job well. That explains why the very, very first assignment that I was given, international scene, was to go and cover a match, a friendly between Cameroon and England at the Wembley Stadium. Remember, the World Cup final had taken place in 1990. And England had eliminated Cameroon at the quarterfinals 3-2 in a game where many thought Cameroon would have won had it not been for some tactical mismanagement. So England then invited Cameroon to Wembley Stadium, the venue of legends, for the international match. Excuse me. Now, the Ministry of Communication, of Information and Culture at the time looked at that match to be more political than sports. So the reporters who had to accompany the team to Wembley had to be real, solid, mature men in the profession. And so they chose Rechercher, the Anglophone journalist, and Abednego Mesang as Francophone journalist. Rechercher said no, posed an objection and said, I have a young man here who just come up. He's going to accompany the Lions. So that is how I went on my first international assignment to the Wembley Stadium. That was in the February of 1991. I remember when I commentated on that match in temperatures of about -6 degrees centigrade. It was such a terrible experience. But I see you've taken us to 1992. So in the course of all of that, my stay in the sports service, Jean Lambert thought that he had found somebody who had the true love for the job. So he started giving me many more assignments than he was giving somebody like Francis Niba, or than he was giving to somebody like Mike Enzer, who had come in from the radio to join the sport desk there. So by assigning me severally, and many more times than the others, I became more and more a commodity, in quotes, for the viewership of the sports program of Cameroon television, that even including the general manager who to discover me there. And so when the time came for the 1992 Africa Cup of Nations, Jean Lambert as the chief of service, no, he was not even the chief of service at the time. The chief of service at the time was Francis Emmanuel Sitwok, who had come from the radio house. So Jean Lameda was, he was the main man running commentaries, but the chief of staff was France Emmanuel Sito. So the propositions he made to the general manager for this coverage team for the 1992 Africa Cup of Nations included my name. So it was made up of myself, Jean Lamena, and then for radio they had Abel Menge, you also had Napoleon Viban, and a group of technicians. That's how I went on my first international assignment to cover the Africa Cup of Nations in 1992 in Senegal. And of course, when I went there, I gave the result that I gave at the time, and it would seem there was a vote of confidence on me by the end of my performance there.
All right, let's talk about Sports Vision, the program which you presented for 27 years, the program that brought Cameroonians across generations. How did Sports Vision come about?
Well, I'll start by saying that you've given me more credit than is due. I didn't anchor the program for 27 years. You know, all the time I was on the desk for 28 plus years. But you know, besides me, the others two who anchored the program. But I became the most regular
on the program,
anchorman of the program. From what history retains, it was Echekiye who created Sports Parade. Sports Parade had to talk about all sporting events on the globe. And then later on, Jean Lambert said that this country loves football more than it does for other sporting disciplines. So we'll need a program that would talk only football. That's how he created Fufu Foot. Then when it came to Bohebel said, if you have Sports Parade, a bilingual program that talks all other sporting disciplines except football, and Fufu Foot talks only football, I think I'll come up with something different in English. And that new thing he brought was called Sport Vision. But the character of Sport Vision was supposed to be didactic. Had to be teaching fans or viewers about the various sporting events and what are the rules, how they went about them, and so on and so forth. But along the line, since the membership of the English sports desk kept on dropping, Jean Lambert said, if we cannot have the many more English reporters on the English desk, we should not try to ride a willing horse to death by assigning a few reporters both for Sport Vision and for Sports Parade. So it's okay, you, the English-speaking arm of the desk, take care of Sport Vision. Now, but there was something about it too. Why they could celebrate that their job had been cut off for them. There was a problem that Sport Vision had been defined to talk other sporting disciplines and not football. So the tendency was that Fufu Food and Sports Parade would have a bigger chunk of the viewership than Sport Vision that had nothing else to make it interesting. And that was how Mike Nze brought in professional wrestling, what he called catch.
Yeah, catch.
And then he tried to make the program more interesting. I came in with some beats of bars of music, but service head Jean Lambert came and said, no, if you don't have jingles for sport, drop music. You have to continue like that. We took it, but Michael still pushed the debate further. I said, now you are talking football in French, talking other sporting disciplines too in French. But we are talking all these other sporting disciplines in English and not in football. So we're taking football. So gradually, Sport Vision usually become another version of Sports Parade plus football. So that was how Sport Vision became what it was till date.
All right, now we are going to look at some major sports events from your point of view. Let's start with the 1990 FIFA World Cup, the quarterfinal, Cameroon, England.
Yeah. Well, then I had just come out of school. I was not even working on CRTV. Because I remember the very first match of the tournament, pitching Cameroon against Argentina. I watched it with some students in the neighborhood, where I lived at the time as a student. I watched the rest of the matches, just move from house to house and watch here sometime, watch that way, and so on and so forth. So just watching like ordinary fans watching. I wasn't with the eyes of a reporter because I'd come out of school. I was only a staffer at the Ministry of Information and Culture. So it was I was just watching the competition just like an ordinary fan would watch the competition. So that was it and nothing else.
Now, 10 years later, 2000, Nigeria versus Cameroon, the finals of the African Cup of Nations in Lagos.
Wow, that was a good one. I remember on the eve of that final game, the representative of the head of state, the Minister of Special Duties of the Presidency of the Republic, Paul Atanganji, came to Lagos to see the Cameroon team on the eve of the competition. So as tradition will hold it, they had the message from the head of state to the players and members of the delegation. So when I arrived at the venue for the meeting, he came in and delivered his message in French. After that, he said, "Comme j'ai vu Fon Echekiye dans la salle, je vais aussi dire quelque chose un peu en anglais." So that's how he went ahead and said what he said in French. So the next day, we went to the stadium at the National Sports Stadium in Surulere. Wow. The crowd I saw at the stadium was one of the biggest crowds I've ever seen in my sports career. That the stadium was almost full, and that was just almost about the same crowd that was still outside. Trying to find access to the stadium. I remember very well that when we started, Gando Piquet and his boys were not far from us. So, you know, the Cameroon colors, national colors are green, red, and yellow. Nigeria is green, white, and green. So there's a predominant green in the color parade on the field. So when Gando Piquet stood up to begin dancing, and Nigeria said, "Oh, you Cameroonian man, why are you dancing here? Why you are not Nigerian? This Cameroon, this thing is Cameroon. I see red next to it." Gando just said, "No, that's fraternity. All of us, just brothers, we're just here to enjoy ourselves." But when the match actually began, to tell you the truth, I was interviewed not long ago on one of the channels in Douala, and they asked me the question which I thought would have been the greatest confrontation between Cameroon and Nigeria. I settled for the 2003 football final of the All Africa Games in Abuja, between Cameroon and Nigeria, because it was an encounter worth writing about and keeping the history books. But this other one in 2000, you know, sometimes when you are commentating on the match, it's difficult for you to enjoy the football, as it were.
Yes.
Now, if you watch a football game without the constraint of taking down the minutes of what happened or taking down note of what happened in this minute and this and that, you don't fully assess what actually goes on in the pitch. So well after that game, and I watched that match again, I said, yes, this has been the greatest football encounter pitting Cameroon against Nigeria. So I said many years afterwards that this match actually lived up to its billing. And so when Cameroon won the final, shortly before the game actually, we're in a hotel, and some two ladies has come to use the pool in the hotel. We're Nigerians, and we had given an appointment that we'll meet after the game because we knew Cameroon was going to win, and we were going to celebrate with them. And they said, no, Nigeria will win, and they were going to celebrate with us. So it was a bet that was put there. But when that match ended, and there was such riot in town, we were obliged to join the Cameroon delegation back to Cameroon that very night. That very night. So we missed the appointments with our two wonderful ladies in Nigeria, and we came back here to find out that the entire nation was already in a festive mood.
Now, very sad one, the death of Marc-Vivien Foé, the Confederations Cup.
That was in 2003. Yeah. You know, there was all to indicate that something was going to happen, something unusual was going to happen. First of all, Jean Lambert was heard talking very sternly to a cameraman. A cameraman who had been of such good behavior throughout the tournament suddenly lost control and became someone else. So Jean Lambert had to raise his voice to call him to order. And I remember I even had to tell Jean Lambert, said that, Chief, there is something unusual. This guy's been so nice. What has suddenly happened today? Jean Lambert said, oh, okay, no, man, I don't want to start me. Sister continue comme ça, and so on. That's what he said. So we left to go to Djelan Stadium in Lyon. At about 1 p.m. that day, there was bright sunlight in the skies of Lyon. But suddenly, we heard a rumbustious rumble. Like, what type of phenomenon is it that the sun shines and there is serious thunder? So we took note of that. We went ahead. The match began. I would say that at some point, I remember myself telling Jean Lambert that I think Veuillez is showing signs of fatigue. So I think Veuillez is showing signs of fatigue. Less than 2 minutes afterwards, he will now collapse and end up dying, as it happened. And then he was dying, and everybody was saying. Of course, with the famous phrase that Jean Lambert uttered, Kelly Marsh.
Kelly Marsh.
So when we left the stadium that day, the match was coming to an end when that thing happened. So as was the habit of FIFA, a choice player was interviewed at the end of the game. So that day, Indepth Pius had scored a goal for Cameroon. So I was asked to go and interview Indepth pitch side. So I went and interviewed him. As I turned around, I saw a group of ladies wailing and rolling on the ground. When I walked out and went towards them to find out what was happening, they said, telling us that they had said that Mark had died, Marc Vivien Foé had died. So, but we needed a confirmation of FIFA. So the press briefing room was so crowded by journalists from all over, wanted to get the latest concerning the situation of Foé, the fate of Marc Vivien Foé. And I think it was Dr. Mueller of FIFA who came and sat and just said, ladies and gentlemen, we have a declaration to make, and thereafter no further declaration concerning the declaration that's going to be made. And we don't expect you to ask any further questions after that. So he said, of course, as all of you expect, we just want to announce to you that the player, Marc Vivien Foé, has died. So they broke the news, total pandemonium in the place. It was such a sorry sight. But then the match had ended, and these Cameroonians who had come all the way from Paris and base had to rush back there. But there was a high-speed train called a TGV that will be leaving the Gare of Lyon in the next 20 minutes. So the picture of a crowd of Cameroonians running towards the train station to catch the last train, and with the flags hoisted and crying and weeping at the same time, that image has never left me. So that is how we got to the stadium, or rather we got to the train station, picked up the places in the bus, on the train, and the train took off. While we were on the train, Jean Lambert received a call from Charles Nogo. At the time, he was Director of Information at CRTV. Spoke to me, and then they passed the phone on to me. And he asked me, how are you doing? I said, I'm fine, sir. Rechercher, have you written the report? We're talking about something that happened in the year 2003. I had not thought that a report would have been written about the matter. The Jean Lambert was sitting on that coach, had already written his report. And so when they told him to file in French, and there was not in English. So they first stopped the train. I quickly jotted down something, and so I delivered it in a combined report with Chechuma Banla. Chechuma Banla would just give me interjections, just give a sentence and I will continue. At some point we stop, give a sentence and continue, and so on and so forth. That's how we lived that night of that happening at Chelang Stadium in France.
All right. 2 years later, 2005, at the Amadou Ahidjo Stadium, the draw Cameroon versus Egypt qualifiers for the 2006 Nations Cup, which Cameroon did not make it, with that missed penalty from Pierre Wome.
The Minister for Sports and Physical Education, Philippe Bargamboa, had led the Cameroon team to prepare for the battle for Abidjan to France. We had a 2-week camp in France with the Lions. When the Lions left France en route to Abidjan, there was a stopover at the Simalé International Airport. I remember the reporter called Francis Ate asking me whether I thought the Lions were fully equipped for the battle for Abidjan. I said yes. I've been with them for 2 weeks and I'm sure they were going to win in Abidjan. So remember, the qualifications had gone in such a way that when Arthur Georges was brought in, he had to win 5 straight matches for Cameroon to qualify. So Arthur Georges had won 3, or had 2 to go. So they asked Arthur Georges the question, Mr. Coach, are you sure we'll make it? He said, no, I've done what is required of me. The rest is left to the players. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm confident. So an ecumenical service was held at the Simalen International Airport. And the Lions flew off for Abidjan. In Abidjan, the battle for Abidjan took place. Cameroon won by 3 goals to 2. I even remember David Maebi, one of the officials of FIFA for the time, saying that mission terminée, because by defeating the Ivory Coast in Abidjan, Cameroon had just 1 more game, and that game was played in Yaoundé. So nobody would have expected that with just that 1 match remaining, Lions would not qualify for the World Cup in 2006. So we got to Yaoundé, and we started preparing for the game. What had happened in Abidjan was that before the game between Cameroon and the Ivory Coast, almost 90% of the stadium was in orange shirts. And so when we came back to Yaoundé, the Minister of Sports and Physical Education, Philippe Bargamboa, said, we are not going to be too confident about the victory as it happened in Abidjan. Because for them to play against Cameroon, they had asked almost every Ivorian to be in the orange t-shirt. But back in Yaoundé, about 2 days to the game, the minister asked every Cameroonian to appear in green. So I sat behind the hall where the minister held the meeting. And when he said it, I unconsciously made like this. And the minister stopped the meeting and said, Fon Echekiye, pourquoi tu secoues la tête? I didn't respond. And I was saying that, but you are the same person who has said it should happen, and it was happening here. So the day of the match, on the eve of the match, 2 very, very important things happened. On the bilingual newscast of CRTV, those autochthones of the Pandena, where the stadium is located, were interviewed. And an individual said, Cameroon will never ever lose a match at this stadium. That is what everybody retained. But as far as I'm concerned, what they retained was what they call in mass communication theory, selective retention.
Selective retention.
Others will say selective perception. They are trying to say something that is in there which he didn't say. He said, you will never lose a match there. Right. Late into the night, reports said a number of cows were slaughtered and given to the autochthones for them to, the indigents of the locality, so that Cameroon could win the next day. So the question is, you are going to go and play in Abidjan, you have an ecumenical service at the Simalen Airport. Against Egypt on the eve, you say, no, we better slaughter cows and whatever and give to the indigents of the locality. I've been told in the Bible that our God is a jealous God. You say, bon, that's what you're doing. Okay, let's wait for the match tomorrow now. That is not all. At an individual level, I dreamt that night that we're playing this game at about 5 minutes to the end of the match. The Minister for Sports and Physical Education left the stadium, entered his car, was driving back home alone and not looking happy. And I woke in the morning, I called in this Pascal Fuda. I said, the dream last night was not the best. Cameroon is not going to the World Cup. He said, come on, sir. Come on. I said, no, I'm just telling you what I dreamed. So when that match got played, and it was now 1-1. 1-1. Cameroon scored and Egypt equalized.
Yes.
The dying minutes of the match, there was a penalty. Go and look at the videotape very closely. 2 things. The first one is when the ball is out there for any player to go and get and take his responsibility, Samuel Eto'o is in the goal man with the Egyptian goalkeeper. Whatever I was discussing with him, nobody can tell. And we've not heard about what they discussed to this day. That's the first thing. Second thing, I think what I saw was that when he was coming to take that penalty, the Egyptian goalkeeper indicated where he was going to kick. He kicked in the opposite direction and the ball did not go in. So Cameroon did not win the match and were eliminated. So as far as I was concerned, as a reporter, I was not surprised. First of all, because of the dream I had. And secondly, the analysis of the situation I was making. That you go and thank God and pray for his blessing to go and play in Abidjan. Yaoundé, reports are telling us that they are slaughtering cows and giving to the indigenous of the locality. So are you serving God and Mammon at the same time? No.
Yeah. All right, now, 2007, the Mount Cameroon race in Veuillez, the historic crawl.
Wow. Kongyi Joseph Shea,
yeah,
who had been predicted by the late Lekunze Timothy to be one of those to eventually become the potential kings of the mountain race, had won the race in 1999, won in 2000. And in 2001, he hoped that he would be the first Cameroonian male athlete to win that race for the third time consecutively. It did not happen.
Yeah,
Reports said that he went up on his way down the slope of the mountain. People actually held him and said that you're going to go and win this thing, we're going to kill you. And then from what he would tell us, he said, no, allow me, I will not win, let me go. So he lost the opportunity to become the king of the mountain. So but in 2002, a year later on, he came and won. So that made it 3 victories on the mountain race for Joseph Kongyi. 2007, we are 5 years after his last performance. And he has said that his performance that year was going to be a rebirth. So when he runs down the slope of Mount Cameroon, he's been overtaken by Eric Mbacha, I think, and January is Bonkiyon. So he's coming in 3rd spot. But all of these guys are overtaking him just as they got into town. He was leading the race. He was actually coming down winning. Then for one reason or another, he wouldn't sustain the demands of, the aerobic demands of any athlete.
Yeah.
Whoever challenge that they meet. And that is how, when he ran in, as he went past the gate leading into the stadium, from what he would tell us later on, he said he suddenly felt that he had been sapped of all energy that he had in him. And so what he would say in the interview, in a special report I did, a historic crawl, he said at that point in time, about 50 meters from the winning line, he said he couldn't continue. But at the same time, he didn't see how he could just sit down there and say he's no longer taking part in this race. So in order not to let down people looking up to him, that is how he started crawling, and then crawled until he crossed the line. I don't remember that there has been any finish in the history of the mountain race before, during, and after my coverage that produced so much passion. At some point, that would have been in 1989 or 88, 89, that Thomas too was just within a whisker of winning. That exhaustion robbed him of victory. He collapsed. There was also Littote Walterson, who ran and was about to cross the finish line, collapsed and started slipping. But those are the kinds of things that characterize the history of the mountain race. But this was a situation where an athlete has victory within sight, and for one or two reasons, it is getting elusive, and it says, no way.
Case of endurance.
Case of endurance.
Yeah,
case of endurance, resistance, and endurance, because that whole thing is a test of resistance and endurance. So I then described that finish as the historic crawl, and it stayed on as part of the history of the mountain race.
Now, Fon Echekiye, you have covered sports stories for many years. Tell us how you used to go about your coverage at a time when there was no internet. How was information gathering all about?
Good. I won't talk like people usually say, no, that's a good question. I'm a journalist, I'm a refined journalist, so it's normal that you ask us such questions. When I was a student in the Advanced School of Mass Communication, we were taught how to keep a diary of daily events. Now, they call it in French, cahier d'actualité. So when we started putting that to practice, it was a question of making sure that every day you put down a record of the most important events of the day. Then no sooner had we started that thing, did I decide to settle for keeping records of sporting events. And that was how the Checks Diary was born. So what am I saying? I am sure that if we were to ask some of our reporters today, that where is the report of this, the script that you wrote for something that happened a month ago, they'll tell you that no.
They don't have it.
They don't have it. So with what I learned at school, keeping that record of daily events, that was the beginning of the Checks Diary, I have about 22 volumes. 22 volumes of containing all those reports. In fact, what I'm saying, in other words, is that I still have in my keeping about 98% of the more than 5,000 reports I ever wrote when I was a student in the School of Journalism, when I was a reporter at CRTV. So I had this habit, therefore, of keeping the best. And then, before I left the school, my first research project report had to do with the study of the phenomenon of bias in sports reporting in Cameroon Tribune. So I went, and thanks to Cameroon Tribune, I could have access to all the Cameroon Tribune editions of the year 1975, 1980, and 1985. By collecting the various sports items, and football in particular, I was able to beef up my checks around. One fine day, I was looking through the records. I said, but this thing, I won't drop this, I have to continue. So that's how I was able to keep a record of things that were happening throughout my career. And that is why I can tell you today that the Cameroon Athletics Federation can be challenged. That every day you go to cover the mountain race, they give you that the first person in the male series was this, the first person in the female series was this, and they give you the timing. But I was taking that report.
You're taking those reports
every year. So what is happening is I have almost 95, 98% of the records from 1996 of the first 3 athletes in the males and females category and their running time. The federation doesn't
from
have
an
that.
eyewitness account.
Yes, each time I went there, because I was a reporter. At some point, I was a field reporter. So what I would do is that when they would read out the name of the first athlete in male series, second athlete, first athlete in the female series, and they give you the name second, and they give you the time. I took the pains to write down all of that. I took down all of that. At the time when other friends were going around and looking for other things, I was taking down those records. So I kept all of those records. And that is why the book that will be coming out has that document, which you could never have found anywhere at all. So it's going to be a special gift to sports reporters, especially those who are interested in mountain race. All
right, let's just talk about the Checks Diary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's how I could put together my reports. So by doing that, I could therefore, 5 years later, do a report of the match between Cameroon and Zambia and be able to go back and consult my diary to remember that this other confrontation between the 2 countries ended like this, with these people scoring and so on and so forth. So I constituted my own yardstick. I constituted my own, something you can call an encyclopedia for sports happenings and details. So that's how I went around writing my reports and beefing them up to statistics which were not found elsewhere.
The Checks Diary will be launched soon. What do you hope to achieve with this particular publication? We know we have written a couple of others.
Well, if you walk back in time, I'm sure you read the article that was written by Eric Chinje on the death of Sam Fonken. When he wrote what he wrote, it was like challenging the people of the profession. Said, but you guys, Peter, you spend a whole lifetime interviewing people, writing stories about them, publishing articles about them. What about you yourself? So that was the question he asked. So he said, the time has come for me to call on each and everyone to write about themselves. Then he quoted me. Luckily, that young reporter I had so many years ago, Fon Echekiye, did something with Zakarinko. So this is the time. When he said, I said, oh, really? I did something with Zakarinko. So maybe I should think about doing that for myself. So first of all, it is the history of my own professional career. People say others could be inspired by that. I don't know how far that is true. Granted, that is true. That is an opportunity for them to be inspired by that. Let them be taught to know that a journalist today became what he became because he did this and this and that, so this and that things happened to him, or this and that thing happened to him. He moved from when he lost the father at the age of 11 to when his uncle came in to sponsor him up to the high school and university, and then finally he got to where he is today. So that's the story. It could inspire other people. Secondly, it's going to provide that batch of results and facts and statistics about certain aspects in football and things that don't have to do with football. Because beyond that, of the close to 5,000 reports I've said I wrote during my professional career, I've also selected 100 of those reports which are published in the book.
In the book. So
they're going to serve maybe to inspire others to see maybe if I wrote like this, it would have produced the effect that Fon Echekiye produced when he wrote like this. So all of that is just coming to say that it is my own contribution to this civilization of journalism, especially in the world of sports.
Fon Echekiye, you are an executive member of the International Federation of Football History and Statistics. What is this body all about?
Okay, the International Federation of Football History and Statistics, IFAS, is based in Lausanne in Switzerland. The current president is called Sheikh Saleh Salem Bawini. Okay, he is taking off from where others before him left off. IFA's main task is to document statistics and history in the world of football. Now, how do I mean? Every year you hear that this player was the best, this was the best goalkeeper, this was the best goal and stuff like that. Those things are drawn from what IFAS does. They do a daily documentation of those things in the world of football. Whatever thing you want to know in the world of football, go and consult www.iffhs.com. You get it on a daily basis. They even go to the point of determining who was Africa's greatest goalkeeper, who was Africa's best striker, which was the Cameroon's most famous 11 starting lineup. All of that is documented thanks to the work done by IFAS. So that is the work we do on a daily basis, document it. And we also have others who have come on board like referees, coaches, and some retired players, because they too have their say in the game of football. So when we go around and ask for their participation, all of that comes in to produce the results that can hardly be contested.
Recently, we saw the awards that were handed from IFAS.
Yeah. Those awards, they've always been done. In fact, it is done on a daily, on an annual basis. That is, not long from now, you're going to have the awards coming up. They also have the awards for the best female team, the best referee, the best club coach, the best national coach, and so on and so on. Those various aspects of the game of football. That is the job of IFAS.
Okay. What can you tell the young generation looking forward to delve into sports journalism?
Oh. I want to answer it in a different way. That they have not been doing well. The reason is very simple. In our years, we did not have internet.
Yes.
But we did what we did. We had our reports spiced with statistics. You now have things at your disposal and you're not using them. There is something, I'm going to give you a clue. Watch what happens during sports programs in various television stations in Cameroon. You will see for the more often than not that sports reports that they don't do their job. They invite guests to come on the set, and the guests who come and do the job for them. Sometimes they sustain points and arguments that that don't convince. But since the sports reporter or sports journalist or sports presenter has not done his homework, he doesn't know whether the challenge is or not.
Yes.
So do your job. You have all those things at your disposal. You have all those things at your disposal. Why can't you do better than what you used to do? If you say what I'm saying is rubbish, I'll say, okay, fine. I agree with you. If I agree with you in its entirety, I want you to go and look at the tapes of all. Play them side by side what you're doing and tell us what they're talking about. Don't talk about the development in technology where a story done on television could be embellished using some kinds of effects and so on. That is different.
Yeah.
Talk about the substance of the report.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here. They have everything at the beck and call to do by far better. Why is it that today people still clamor for the return of Jean Lambert now?
And even for your return.
Is that right?
Yes.
I am not aware of that. I'm still aware of some people saying
coming for your return.
Fon Echekiye used to deceive us.
The 2022 World Cup, many people wanted Fon Echekiye to run the commentaries. It's no, even during the AFCON 2021.
Well, there is something you have to understand too. Lord, it doesn't matter how good you are, you can never, ever, ever unanimity.
Yeah.
There are always going to be some people who are going to go against what they're doing and what you don't do. Okay. So what I'm saying at the end of the day is that they have the opportunity to do by far better than what we did in our days, right? In fact, the truth is, there are so many reporters at CRTV and even other private stations that once in a while I send text messages to say, no, it's not like this, it's this way. No, it's not like this, this way. Just because having spent 3 decades on this thing, I find it really very difficult to completely break away from it. Yes. Especially when I sit back and I look at the legacy we left behind, people are trampling on them because of laziness and because they have refused to be better than we used to do.
All right, before we go, let's move away from football. You're also a passionate singer. You created the St. Ignatius chorus. How is it doing? And first of all, what pushed you to create that choir? All
right. In Bishop Rogan College in the days when I hoped to become a priest, we taught all kinds of subjects, including music. The late Father Basubang Donatus taught us the theory of music. So every other student who went through Biroko in those days became a chorister at some point. Either he was leading the choral group or he became a chorister. So that always been part of us. Now in Yaoundé, a parishioner once asked me to begin a choral group in a parish in which we attend Mass, which I did. And it was called St. Ignatius Choir, because Ignatius is my first name, and I've not heard so many people talk about Ignatius anywhere in terms of choir. Others talk about St. Cecilia, St. Andrew, and stuff like that. So, and then long after that, for 1 or 2 reasons, I broke away from the choir and went and created now the chorus. The difference between the choir and the chorus is that the choir learns songs, the chorus sings. So the chorus, you just ask the question, how are they doing? They are doing fine. During the book launches in Douala, Boya, and Yaoundé, they will be in action. All right. Thank you very much, Fon Echekiye, for accepting the invitation. I would say it's a massive pleasure to have you here. Thank you so very much. And maybe I just add one thing, because the invitation card is calling on or inviting guests to the book launch on Monday. It's at 3:30 p.m. in Yaoundé. They will actually begin at 4. Same thing in Douala on Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. will begin at 4. Boya, Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. will begin at 4. So that is it, and you're welcome. All right, thank you too. You're welcome. And to you, televiewers, it was a pleasure being with you on this edition of the program. Until next time, it's bye-bye.